Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Janice Love, also known as the First Lady Coach, and I equip seasoned pastors' wives to have the clarity, the confidence, and the courage to walk boldly into the destiny for which she was chosen by being perfectly who God created her to be. All right, let's go. Tonight, we are going to be talking about, and this is focused on Black History Month. We're going to be sharing three important messages your ancestors may be telling you. Now, I am going to talk tonight about my grandfather, but you know how in the Wakanda movie, whenever the key characters were faced with situations that an ancestor would come back and speak to them. I wish that could happen in these days and times. But again, I have found that throughout my life history, because of the rich history that we have in our family, that oftentimes my ancestors have spoke to me just through the stories that I have heard about them throughout the years. So over the next couple of weeks, I will be sharing some of the stories, very rich stories about my own family. And so tonight we are going to start with my grandfather. So let me introduce you to my grandfather. This is my paternal grandfather, and he had quite a life story. Now, when he passed, I was somewhere around maybe 2 or 3 years old, so I really don't remember him. But so much about what I have learned about him really helps me to understand who my father was. And also, in so many ways, it helps me to understand who I am. So let's talk a little bit about three lessons that we, each one of us, can learn. And again, when you hear these stories, so many of you will be able to connect with them because perhaps your ancestors dealt with some of the very first things. So let's go ahead and get right into it. I want to tell you the first message that I have clearly gotten from my ancestors, including mainly my grandfather, is the first thing is how to survive. Now, some of you may or may not know this about me, but I am a descendant of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. My family is from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that is where I grew up. But let me tell you the story about my grandfather. My grandfather, who was a father himself during the time that the Tulsa Race Massacre happened, my grandfather lived through it. So, first of all, he has taught me how to be a survivor. So, the story is told that night when the fire raced through, the bombs were dropped, when the fire raced through the north side of Tulsa, Oklahoma, that my father, along with his young daughter, she was 7 or 8 at the time, they went and hid under the railroad tracks. Now, because I am here today and because my father wasn't born until later, that let me know that he survived. And he, as well as my aunt, survived. But they did what they had to do in order to survive. Again, they hid under the railroad tracks. And we don't know the story. Again, we don't know. We just have bits and pieces of the story, but we know that's what he had to do to survive. In fact, whenever I go to Tulsa, I drive right over that railroad track where it is said that my grandfather and my aunt hid until they could get to safety. And praise God, he made it to safety. And not only did he make it to safety, but we're going to move on to our second point. But again, we look at our situation now, and we don't have to go through half of the things that our forefathers or our ancestors went through, but they have taught us, because they survived, we too should have that desire. And not only that desire, but also know that we have the strength, we have what God put in us in order to survive. So again, the very first thing, the very first message that our ancestors have left for us is how to survive. What are the stories in your own family where your ancestors went through trying times because of racial issues? some of the same ones we're having today, right? There are so many stories out there. Are you asking your family about their story? Do you know the stories about your family and how they survived? All right. So again, the first thing was the first message that we clearly our ancestors are clearly trying to share with us is how to survive. Now, the second thing that our ancestors want to share with us is how to thrive. Now, you look at this picture. This is my grandfather, again, standing in front of a Bluebird cab company cab. And what I will tell you is that my uncle, that was his cab company. There are also stories, and again, things that I barely remember because I was so young, but my grandfather came out of this race massacre. You all know what happened in the race massacre. They destroyed all of North Tulsa. There, all of the businesses were destroyed. So my grandfather, after it was all said and done, he decided that, hey, I'm not going to live like this. There was a thriving center here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So he started his own businesses. So that cab you see him standing in front of is his cab company, as well as what we know as the Emerson Motel that was in Oklahoma. Now, what's interesting is that over the years living here in Kansas City, I may be sharing with someone about my family history, and they have stayed at the Emerson Hotel. It's no longer there. But again, look at what I learned from this, that my grandfather and others like him had gone through such a devastating event, but yet they came out of it not only surviving, but he went on to thrive. Now, they tell me, one of my neighbors one time told me just how rich my grandfather was. Now, I can't say I have the same money, but again, he thrived. And look at the lessons that I can take from that. And what lessons can you take from your ancestors about not just how they survived, but how they thrived? All right, so that is the second point. Our ancestors are speaking to us today on how they thrive. Look at all of the accomplishments of that we hear about during Black History Month, all the inventions, all of the stories of survival, all the stories of doing great and wonderful things, all those things that are not quite in those history books that we have to find out for ourselves. But again, they encourage us that we too can thrive. And then finally, the third thing that our ancestors want to tell us, and what I hear loud and clear from my own ancestor, my grandfather, is the third thing is how to connect. Now, Tulsa was a small but large community. And so often in our own communities, African Americans are a small community, but they know how to connect with one another in order to be able to get what they need. Now, we all have heard no man is an island, and God put us on this earth to connect with others. So, in order to survive, in order to thrive, we have to be connected. And it's so important that we understand that what connection is something that we cannot live without. We say we can try it, right? But we cannot live without that connection. So I learned truly from my grandfather. His businesses were in the African American community. He networked with other people in the community, not only to be able to provide services, but also to help build up other people. Now, there's one last story that I want to tell you about my grandfather that I heard. And this was from a former neighbor of mine. They say that my grandfather in his cab, and they say the older he got, it was a little harder for him to see, right? And so they say that he happened to back over a kid's bicycle when he was backing up. He ran over a kid's bicycle and destroyed the bicycle. Well, the story is told that my grandfather told him to forget about that. And he pulled out a big wad of money and gave it to the kids so that he could go and get a brand new bicycle. And that's what community is all about, supporting and helping one another, not only to survive, but also to thrive. So think about what your ancestors, again, are telling you today. What messages do they really want you to know? look at your own family history. Spend some time talking to your ancestors. And again, um, dive deep into it. Find out the stories that maybe you haven't heard. It's a shame that now we're having to piece together some things because we did not sit at the feet of our ancestors and listen to those stories that would mean so much to us during our day and time. All right, so that is pretty much how you can you'll know three important messages your ancestors may be telling you. And again, it's how to survive, how to thrive, and then how to connect. And it's again, it's so important that we have those connections. So that is what I wanted to talk about for our first session of Black History Month. So, who is out there today? I have some important announcements that I want to share with you all today. It's a brand new year, and I am so excited that we are coming out of this pandemic. Praise God, we are coming out of this pandemic. So,